of Portland's Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs forum. I'm Sharon Van Sickle Robbins, president of City Club, and I would like to welcome you all, those of you here at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB or KBPS radio, or watching on Portland Community Media's CityNet 30. Thank you for joining City Club on Friday, February 4th for this week's Friday Forum. In consideration of those sitting close to you and those in our radio and television audiences, will everyone in the room please make sure your cell phones are silenced. Today we will hear from Multnomah County Chair Jeff Cogen about the county's outlook for 2011. But first, a few announcements. I'd like to thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine, and I'd also like to offer our appreciation to the Friday Forum corporate sponsors whose generous financial support make these Friday Forums possible. We are extremely pleased to have as our winter quarter sponsors Stoll Reeves, The Standard, and West Coast Bank. Please join me in offering them our sincere appreciation. If your company or firm would like to be a City Club sponsor, please contact City Club staff at the back of the room or call the City Club offices. This spring, City Club will offer a coordinated series of thought-provoking programs that will challenge conventional political wisdom and explore innovative and long-term solutions to Oregon's fiscal crisis. Kicking off with a talk by Governor John Kitzhaber on March 4th, City Club's Friday Forums and other events will investigate new ways to stimulate economic development, improve government services, and ensure adequate revenue. Keep your eyes open for more about our spring series entitled From Crisis to Opportunity, Exploring Solutions to Oregon's Fiscal Challenges. And now to today's program. The Multnomah County government pulls a lot of weight. The county oversees one of the country's most successful library systems and 6 Willamette River bridges. It also provides mental health and addiction treatment, health care, education assistance, and other services that help vulnerable populations. All of these are substantial responsibilities. But with state government facing massive budget cuts, the need for the county's services is skyrocketing just as government's ability to pay for them is strained to the breaking point. Today, Multnomah County Chair Jeff Cogen will discuss how vital services can be maintained and the county's resources can be effectively deployed in these challenging times. Jeff moved to Portland in 1992 and founded the Portland Pretzel Company, the city's first certified organic bakery. He said it's the only thing as twisted as politics that he's been involved with. He served as communications director for the Multnomah Commission on Children and Families and was board president for Hands on Greater Portland. In 2003, he was named chief of staff to City Commissioner Dan Saltzman, where he played key roles in creating the Children's Investment Fund and building the new Rosa Parks Elementary School in North Portland. He was first elected to the Multnomah County Commission in 2006, and in 2010, he won election to a 4-year term as county chair. And now please help me welcome Chair Jeff Cogen.
Thank you very much. It's really good to be back at City Club. This is one of the few places in town where people don't tease me for getting excited about civic engagement. And that's a good thing because that's just what I intend to do. Today I've been asked to talk about the state of the county. But as I thought about what I was going to say, I realized that the title's a bit confusing. Does it mean the state of county government or the state of Multnomah County as a community? Naturally, as a politician, I decided to settle this dilemma in the most long-winded way possible, and I'll talk about both. I grew up in Miami in the 60s and 70s and saw my hometown face many of the same challenges now facing Multnomah County: a rapidly growing and rapidly diversifying population, the need to balance economic growth with protection of the natural environment, and the struggle of ensuring that prosperity is broadly shared by all members of the community. When I moved here nearly 20 years ago, I immediately fell in love with this community, a place not only stunningly beautiful, but a place that vocally shared my values of compassion and sustainability and social justice. I also saw a place brave enough and self-confident enough to chart its own course. That spirit still moves me, but while loving our community, we need to also acknowledge that our reality doesn't always match our self-image. It's disheartening to see that we lead the nation not in the quality of our schools, but in the percentage of our residents who go to sleep hungry each night. We see thousands of our neighbors unable to find work, causing families that have never before needed help to face foreclosure and possible homelessness. And despite our progressive values, our community suffers from heartbreaking inequality, which keeps our vaunted quality of life far from a reality for too many of our neighbors. In Multnomah County, people of color earn less than 50% as much as their white counterparts. They have high school dropout rates 4 times as high, and they're significantly overrepresented in our criminal justice system. This is simply unacceptable. Multnomah County has to be committed to changing these things. I'm committed, because for me, it's about tikkun olam. In my house growing up in Miami, I was raised with the concept of tikkun olam, the Jewish belief that each of us has the duty to work to heal and repair the world. Tikkun olam led me to enter public service. Now, I know it may not be trendy right now in our current climate of Tea Party-inspired anti-tax, anti-government rhetoric, but I believe that government has a huge role to play in turning our community's values and aspirations into reality. And I'm happy to say that Multnomah County government is well positioned to lead the way. Telling the story of Multnomah County government really must begin with the more than 4,500 dedicated county employees who work day in and day out to help maintain our quality of life. Their work is tikkun olam in action as we care for the vulnerable, keep people safe, and help maintain our quality of life. And our employees are supported by a board of county commissioners that is engaged, collaborative, and focused on finding practical solutions to the problems we face. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge my colleagues. Commissioner Deborah Kafori has infused the county's efforts on homelessness and housing with passion and creativity. And she's provided a steady leadership on one of the biggest construction projects in Multnomah County's history, the effort to replace the Selwood Bridge. Thank you, Deborah. Judy Shiprack's leadership on public safety and her work in creating the Multnomah County Food Action Plan have charted a path forward for our community toward a safer and healthier future. Thank you, Judy. Diane McKeel has energetically supported the interests of her East County constituents by, among other things, helping lead the long overdue new East County Courthouse project across the finish line. Diane. And our newest colleague, Loretta Smith, has in her short time on the board shown impressive leadership with a focus on the needs of children and seniors and a relentless desire to provide, as she likes to say, real solutions for real people. Loretta. I'd also like to acknowledge our Sheriff Dan Staton and our District Attorney Mike Shrunk for their strong leadership protecting our public safety, and our Auditor Steve March for ensuring that our residents get the best possible value for their tax dollars. All these people will tell you, if you ask them, that these are tough times in Multnomah County. And it's not just because of the down economy. Changes to Oregon's property tax laws in the 90s have severely undermined our ability to serve our community. This year, Multnomah County faces yet another multi-million-dollar budget deficit. It's the 11th straight year in a row of cuts at Multnomah County. That's right, 11 straight years of cuts. Our broken tax system means that in good years, we cut services, and in bad years, we slash them. I want to be blunt. This is undermining our public safety, weakening our safety net, and threatening our long-term prosperity, and we must begin charting a new path. In the short run, this means doing everything possible to preserve our most critical services. That's why I'm focusing on three things. First, restructuring our county operations to make them as efficient and cost-effective as possible. Second, developing partnerships to achieve things together that we can't do alone. And third, creating innovative and strategic responses that leverage minimal government investments into significant community results. Facing not just cuts to the county's budget, but an impending tsunami of state cuts, I decided it was critical that we reevaluate every aspect of how we do business at Multnomah County to ensure that every possible dollar is spent providing critical services to our residents. If you read the Oregonian this morning, then you know that this work has already begun. And it's not easy. People will lose their jobs. Good people who have worked hard on behalf of our community. I don't relish these choices, but the alternative is even worse. Cuts to vital services in our community, services that are already facing deep cuts from the state. So we've frozen management salaries, and we're making changes to our managers' span of control and improving the efficiency of our purchasing, of the way we run our buildings and our fleet and our business services. We've even questioned assumptions that are decades old. Does our workforce need to be based in offices, or might it be better and cheaper to have a mobile, more community-based business model? And we've been looking everywhere, even under the proverbial couch. We save the counties hundreds of thousands of dollars annually by switching from Microsoft to Google as our email server. We cut our energy costs by $75,000 by making the laundry facility at our Inverness jail more efficient. And we save $45,000 a year by requiring that all county printers replace their empty toner cartridges with recycled ones. I think you can see a pattern here. Multnomah County is digging deep to change the way we do business, to be as efficient as possible without sacrificing our mission and our values. But keeping the back end running smoothly is only part of the equation. We're also working to ensure that our programs are models of cost effectiveness. The Multnomah County Health Department radically retooled its healthcare service delivery, increasing the number of people served by more than 10%, despite an 18% reduction in their county budget. Our Aging and Disability Services Division continues to improve in-home services which allow low-income seniors to live independently while reducing healthcare costs. And our Department of Community Justice is using best practices in the field to reduce crime in our community by giving people the support they need to move away from criminal behavior. Consider the story of Antoinette Washington, a remarkable young woman whom I met 2 months ago. Antoinette grew up in a tough neighborhood, and in her teens, she got into trouble with the law. On probation for assault and robbery, Antoinette came in contact with the Department of Community Justice. She had to make a decision about her future. With help from the juvenile justice staff, Antoinette decided that she didn't want a life of crime. She wanted to turn things around. And Antoinette enrolled in a training program at the county-supported Youth on a Mission thrift store. This thrift store provides meaningful work for kids on probation. They learn job skills, earn a paycheck, and get the help they need to leave their past behind. Antoinette is 19 now, and she's the manager of the store. She supervises others who are trying to get a fresh start like her. Antoinette's an inspiration to me, and I'm happy to say she's here with us today, sitting at my table. Please join me in warmly welcoming Antoinette Washington. That's her right there. Yay, Antoinette. Or consider the story of Lorraine Price, a woman I met just the other day. Lorraine has lived in Northeast Portland since the 1920s. Lorraine suffers from macular degeneration, and she's nearly blind. But that doesn't stop her from living independently in the home she's been in for almost 40 years. She knows how to get around despite her failing eyesight. And Lorraine's son, Marvin, who lives across town, takes her out to hear music on weekends. She's a big jazz fan. Lorraine gets help from home care workers who handle housekeeping and laundry, grocery shopping, and meal preparation. Without this help, Lorraine couldn't live on her own, and she would end up in a nursing home, costing taxpayers as much as 6 times more than the in-home services she now receives. Lorraine was hoping to be here with us today, but at 104, you got to give people a break when they're not feeling up to par. But I would like to acknowledge her case manager, Nathan, who's here and who's sitting with us today. When I was talking to Lorraine yesterday, I found out that she recently celebrated her 104th birthday. And the best birthday present we can give her is to make sure she's able to continue to count on the social service safety net and continue living independently in the place she feels most comfortable, her own home. The second task we have before us is to create partnerships to accomplish things together that we couldn't do alone. A great example of this sort of partnership is our recently opened Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Services. Last year alone, the number of domestic violence homicides in Multnomah County doubled. It's a huge and complex problem, and there's no easy solution. Unfortunately, we were making things even harder for victims of domestic violence who struggled to navigate a system that forced them to go to one place to report abuse and another to get a restraining order, and yet another to get safe housing, and yet another to get services, all the while living in fear that their abuser might discover them. Despite an age of declining resources, a community of partners coalesced to create a one-stop center for victims of domestic violence. Led by Commissioner Dan Saltzman, the city of Portland got the ball rolling, providing critical services for funding and operations and systems navigators. The federal government, the state, the courts, our sheriff and district attorney, and a dozen different community organizations all brought resources to the table. I'm particularly proud of the county's contribution. A building which was sitting empty and unused was made available to house the center, a huge contribution that made the entire project pencil out and didn't cost the county a penny. I'm thrilled to tell you that the Gateway Center opened late last year, and it's been hugely successful, serving more than 500 women in its first 4 months of operation. And while this was a true team effort, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Commissioner Dan Saltzman, who's here with us today, and who was the motivator in chief of this highly successful partnership. And we're building on that success. Later this spring, the county will open an important new facility to help mentally ill people who are in crisis. We're all too aware of the tragedies that occur when those with mental illness have encounters with law enforcement. Again, this is a serious problem, it's complex, and it doesn't lend itself to quick fixes. But that doesn't mean we can't make things better. Right now, people who are experiencing a mental health crisis have few options. They often wind up in hospital emergency rooms or suffer the indignity of being locked up in jail. Many of us recognize that we needed a third option, a place for people in crisis to stabilize and connect with long-term help. It's not a panacea, but this new center will provide a desperately needed service and minimize confrontations between mentally ill people and the police. Now, in the past, attempts to provide new mental health services often ran into a wall of finger-pointing and avoided responsibility. It's not our job, let the state handle it, or the county, or the city. And I'm really happy to say we've moved beyond that. And the state, and the city, and the county have all stepped forward to share the funding of this important new service, working in partnership with wonderful community organizations like Central City Concern and Telecare. And I'd like to acknowledge Mayor Sam Adams, who's here with us today, and who never wavered in partnering with the county to address this issue. Thank you, Sam. Proving once again that when we set aside our parochial turf concerns, we have the ability to make great things happen. We expect the new Crisis Assessment and Treatment Center to open its doors this May. Another partnership that's a literal bridge to the 21st century is coming soon to the Selwood neighborhood. Now, I know everyone in this room is familiar with the problem. The Selwood Bridge has needed repairs and replacement for decades, and it's rated a 2 on a federal safety rating of 1 to 100, with 100 being the best. But yeah, I know. Boggles the mind. But a new bridge will cost almost $300 million, and Multnomah County simply could not afford to do that on its own. Once again, the solution lies in partnership. The state and the federal government have played critical roles, each making significant financial commitments, and as has Clackamas County. Yesterday, we finalized our agreement with the city of Portland, and while there were a few bumps on the road, the end result is terrific. Not only have our partners made significant financial contributions, but working together, we improved the design of the bridge, making it safer, minimizing its impact on the environment, and best of all, shaving $40 million off the project cost. Proving that sometimes you actually can do more with less. I want to thank my colleagues around the region and the state for their vision and for their partnership. We couldn't do this without them. Now, this spirit of partnership needs to carry over to our relationships with the business community as well. In this economy, people are hurting, and businesses are struggling to preserve jobs. When I met Paul Wenlick, the owner and president of ISPRO, he was in a jam. ISPRO, a local auto parts manufacturer, had just had its lines of credit frozen in the wake of the financial crisis. Paul, working hard to compete against cheap overseas labor, needed to purchase some sophisticated manufacturing equipment to keep his costs competitive. Without the equipment, Paul was going to have to outsource a big chunk of work and cut local jobs. He asked for my help, and though economic development isn't on the county's formal list of responsibilities, it is absolutely essential to maintaining our quality of life. So I convened a meeting with officials from Business Oregon and the Portland Development Commission, and together we came up with a way to help. A low-interest loan was made available to allow ISPRO to buy the critical equipment in the nick of time. That allowed Paul to keep his production here, saving desperately needed jobs in Multnomah County. And today, ISPRO is thriving, providing more than 100 employees in Northeast Portland with family wage jobs. It's a good thing. Now, I've talked about the county's efforts to be cost-effective and to create partnerships. But government also needs to think beyond the traditional program delivery model as the only way we respond to our community's problems. At Multnomah County, we've been pioneering innovative ways of helping the community, and I think there's tremendous potential here. Here are a couple of examples. You'll be hearing a lot about healthy eating and active living in the next few months as part of our new initiative from the County Health Department. So eat those cookies now before we make it that you don't want to. Facing an epidemic of obesity that's caused devastating and hugely expensive explosion of chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease, the health department decided to focus upstream and work at preventing these problems in the first place. We piloted a healthy eating, active living effort in North Portland, created a health equity initiative to focus on the needs of communities of color, and led the charge to have our county be the third community in the country to pass chain restaurant menu labeling, something that has spread through the nation and which will begin this summer. This exceptional leadership not only got results, it got noticed. And last year, we received a $7 million grant from the Federal Centers for Disease Control to help us build on those successes and continue to be a model for the nation. The health department has now invested this federal money into more than 30 community organizations throughout the county to create a broad-based community collaboration. And the partners have just launched the It Starts Here campaign to provide practical community-based solutions to the obesity epidemic. This is cutting-edge work, but there's a reason that the federal government invested so heavily in the Multnomah County Health Department, their impressive track record. And I have every reason to believe that this effort will keep them on a roll, so to speak. I just thought of that one. Another example of innovation at Multnomah County, our County Crops Farm, was developed in response to a crisis. Hunger in Oregon and in Multnomah County has been skyrocketing in recent years. When I heard that the Oregon Food Bank was having trouble getting enough food to feed all the people in our community, I knew that Multnomah County had to help. But we really couldn't help in the traditional way. We couldn't write a large check or create a new anti-hunger program. We were facing a huge budget shortfall. Luckily, I had an ace in the hole. My chief of staff, Marisa Madrigal. Yay, Marisa. Marisa got the idea that we could use surplus county property to grow food for the food bank. And it turns out that we had property that was perfect for the job. The old county poor farm in Troutdale across from McMiniman's Edgefield, which was lying fallow and unused. But farming isn't cheap, and we were broke. So we needed to be creative. And I realized that in this case, the county's greatest resource was its ability to convene the community. And wow, did that community ever come together. Area businesses led by McMiniman's and Portland General Electric donated money to fund the irrigation system. The city of Troutdale donated the water. Metro donated compost, and local farms and nurseries donated starts and seeds. And best of all, the labor is entirely either volunteers, primarily through our partnership with Hands on Greater Portland, or what I like to call not quite volunteers. You know, if you get a DUI and you get community service, not quite volunteers. And between these volunteers and not quite volunteers, we've grown more than 25,000 pounds of fresh organic food, every single bit of which has gone to Snowcap, the Oregon Food Bank affiliate in East Multnomah County, and has gone to feed hungry people in our community. Now, County Crops is both a substantive, important effort providing food to hungry people in our community, but also an example of what's possible as we begin to think creatively about how we can meet our community's needs. So, while we face challenges, we have powerful tools at our disposal. A lean, cost-effective county government whose leadership works well together, rapidly deepening partnerships with jurisdictions around the region and the state, and a range of innovative and inspiring community-based initiatives. But even all of that is not enough to ensure our future prosperity. There's still something missing. And that brings me back to my initial question. Is the state of the county just about county government, or is it about the whole community? In the end, I think the question's based on a false premise, because it sets government up as a force outside of the community, as them rather than us. And that's not right. Government is at its core simply the way a community comes together to address its collective needs and to invest in itself. Government represents the community and is the expression of the community's values and aspirations. And that's the final component we need to move forward, an active and engaged community. Because these aren't problems that government's going to solve for you. These are challenges we must all face together. Our future depends on this community coming together to overcome our challenges to create a better future. Because the way we respond to the challenges we face, whether we decide to dig deep and invest in our young people and support our seniors and those with mental health and other needs, or alternatively, we retreat into a shell of cynicism and disengagement, those choices will shape our future. We're at a critical moment, an inflection point for our community. Are we going to shrug our shoulders and let it pass by? Or are we going to do whatever it takes to succeed together? This is a state built by people who carved out a living in a hostile environment by working together, caring for their neighbors, and investing in their future. We need to tap that spirit again. We need to embrace Tikkun Olam, because it's up to all of us to heal and repair this community. Each and every one of us needs to dig deep and find that place inside of us of compassion and optimism and use that spirit to come together. Get involved, volunteer, Help your neighbors and your community. And standing here before you today in one of the citadels of engaged community, I feel confident that we will rise to the challenge, walk our talk, and make this the community we all want it to be. And that together, we will ensure that the state of our county is strong and that our future is bright. Thank you very much.
The first question for our speaker, as always, will be from our Friday Forum host. Our host today is City Club Governor John Branham. John is the Director of Programs for Grantmakers for Education. He previously served as the Director of Development for Portland Public Schools and spent 2.5 years in the Peace Corps in South Africa. John?
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Chair Cogen. I think leading during challenging times is never easy, and I think it's fair to say that as citizens, we all appreciate the diligence and hard work you put into your role, so thank you. And so for my question, I think you did an exceptional job of laying out the strategies you've employed recently to help us sort of provide the services at the county that we need during these difficult times. And I guess my question is, what are the strategies that you might suggest that we employ over the next 10 and 20 years so that we can sort of get outside of this negative cycle of 11 straight declining budgets? So what strategies would you offer?
Thanks, John. So there's a couple of different things that I think we need to do. One of which is, as a community and as a state, we need to focus on our common interests. We've gotten to a place where we are spending far too much energy and far too much, we're being distracted a lot by our divisions. The business community feels alienated from government. Labor and business are fighting. The young and the old are pitted against each other. And that's a lose-lose scenario. And so the first thing I think we need to really focus on is we're all in this together. And that if we don't do the kinds of things I'll suggest in a second, we're all going to lose. And the kinds of things we need to do in the long run is make investments. For far too long, we've been, frankly, disinvesting in our future. Part of that is education, part of that is social services, part of that is economic development. What we've been doing is living on our seed corn as a community. We've been running on fumes. Too often, I think, we believe our own good press, and a lot of it's based on truth. We're a great community. We've created a very livable place. But we got here through a lot of hard work. And if we want to have a different future, we need to have a different reality today. And that means, among other things, taxes can't be a four-letter word. We have to understand that it costs money to make the kinds of investments we need to be the kind of community that we think we are. I'll end with that.
We'll now take questions from the floor. Asking questions at Friday Forums is a privilege of City Club membership. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your questions in 30 seconds or less. If I flash this question mark card at you, it means that we have not heard the question yet. And the questioners, if you have questions, you go over to this mic over here to my left.
Peter Fenner, member of the City Club. You spoke of partnerships that you're involved with, some of which have been very successful. Have you considered cooperating with Homeland Security to provide them use of your jail facility, which is unopened, rather than them build a detention center in a residential neighborhood in South Portland?
Well, I assume you're referring to the Wapato facility in North Portland?
Yes.
At this point, we've entertained conversations from anyone who's interested in using that facility. They're not among the folks who've expressed any interest in that. My hope at this point, we're pursuing a partnership with the state. It's always challenging. It's particularly challenging in difficult times. But I think that the best use of that facility would be something similar to the way it was originally designed, which is as a place that offers secure alcohol and drug treatment for folks in this community to help them get ready to come back out into the community. And that's more consistent with the kind of efforts that are happening at the state than it would be with Homeland Security. At the end of the day, if we can't make this work with the state or with our local partners, I think we do have to broaden the scope of what we're open to, because this is a large, expensive building that's sitting empty, and that's not okay.
Edward Hershey, City Club member. Contrary to conventional wisdom, the City Club is not the only place in Oregon where a call for more taxes gets a round of applause. In the last 10 years, virtually every time the electorate here in this region and statewide has been given a choice of retaining or even increasing taxes, it has accepted that choice at the ballot box. Yet even the progressive political establishment here seems to think that Oregonians will not do what you've just said we ought to do. How do you convince your political colleagues to get the courage to take the stand you've just taken?
Well, you know, I think that, frankly, it's always challenging, and it's not, there isn't a consensus. Taxes are hard. No one likes paying taxes. I don't like paying taxes, and taxes pay my salary. But at the end of the day, these are choices that have consequences. And if we want to have the kind of community that we need and ought to have, we have to make investments in it. And I think that if you have a conversation about should we have taxes or have not taxes, you lose, because no one wants to have taxes. If you have the conversation about what kind of community do we want to be and what does it take to get us there, then I think you could be successful. I think you can be successful in Multnomah County. I think you can be successful in Oregon. And I think that's how we have to talk about it. We have to be very clear that it's the consequences of whether or not we make investments are what kind of a community we wind up with. And so by having a very clear statement of this is who we want to be and this is what it takes to get there, that's how I believe we will make that happen.
Tamsin Wassell, City Club member. I have the honor of representing a City Club committee that has now spent a year studying mental health delivery via the county services. I was pleased, Chair Cogen, that you did mention the new 16-bed acute care facility that has been in the works for quite some time that will open now in 2011. And clearly mental health has come to the forefront in both this community with some very high-profile killings and shootings of mentally ill people, but also then, unfortunately, in Tucson just recently, in which mental illness also drove someone else to commit high-profile crimes. We have learned over the last year of our study that having 16 additional acute beds for mental health is only a very small part of what it's going to take to change mental health services to the vulnerable people in Multnomah County. I was wondering if you could let us know what your priorities for 2011 will be and what will be different this year with mental health services in Multnomah County.
Well, the major difference this year is we are going to have this important new facility, the Crisis Assessment and Treatment Center. The other major difference is we're going to be struggling as hard as we can to keep things where they are. I agree with you that our system isn't what it should be. Really, if you want to know why that is, you look back about 30 years ago when we began what was a very compassionate move, the deinstitutionalizing of people who formerly were basically warehoused in mental hospitals. And there was a decision made that that wasn't compassionate, and it also was very expensive. And we said, it was really a national movement, okay, we're going to deinstitutionalize these folks, and we're going to create a community-based system of care, which is more compassionate and more affordable. It was a great choice, and they did the first part of it. They deinstitutionalized all these people, and they didn't do the second part. They didn't fund a really effective community-based system of care. And the bottom line is, if we want to have a better mental health system, we have to fund that system of community-based care. Unfortunately, our state is looking at a $3.5 billion shortfall, and the reality is what's much more likely to happen in the next year is the inadequate system that we currently have is going to come under tremendous pressure and is likely to see significant cuts. And I wish that wasn't what I had to tell you about what to look forward into the next year, but I can tell you that it's going to be a really tough year. I do think that it ought to help generate a conversation in this community about what kind of community do we really want to be? What matters to our community? Do we feel okay leaving people on their own, wandering the streets or going into jail because they're mentally ill? And if not, what are we going to do about it? And again, to go back to the last question, doing something about it isn't cheap, and it isn't free, and it requires an investment of resources. And I wish the state was moving in a different direction than it is, but the current reality is what it is. And we're going to face that, and then we're going to have to figure out as a community how we're going to respond. And I can tell you, I don't want to respond by saying, gee, that's okay.
Len Bergstein, member. Thanks for the very thoughtful presentation. Could you go back over again what the county's priorities are, what, your wish list with the state of Oregon and the federal government? What's the specific things you're asking for as part of your agenda?
Well, in terms of the federal government, probably our single biggest wish is that they provide the remaining funding for the Selwood Bridge. In terms of the state government, there's a number of specific areas where we're hoping that the reality is it's how the pain gets allocated. We're hoping that they don't make the cuts to mental health that I was just talking to you about. We're hoping that in the cuts that they do make, they prioritize the most vulnerable people, and they also work with the local community and hear our concerns about where we'd like to see the cuts. But the other thing we're asking for the state is, given that we understand that the state is in no position to fund all of our needs right now, and in fact, it's only going to make things worse. What we are hoping the state will do is unshackle our hands in ways in which they've shackled us. The state has specifically preempted local governments from a whole range of activities that might provide a difference. And I'll give you the most dramatic example. A couple of years ago, there was a statewide ballot measure to increase cigarette taxes to provide for some very important services. They originally raised the proposal. It was very popular across the state. And then the tobacco companies had a blistering ad campaign all across the state. And it wound up going down in 35 of 36 counties. They rejected it. In Multnomah County, despite the blizzard of negative advertising, our residents voted yes. They still wanted to see an increase in cigarette taxes to pay for vital services. So you might think, okay, Cogen, go ahead and increase the cigarette taxes to help out those services, but we can't because the state has specifically preempted us from helping ourselves. And so while we recognize that the state may not be in a position to help us, our biggest single legislative agenda is to have them untie our hands and let us help ourselves.
Ted Kay, City Club member. Contributions to the public employee retirement system constitute a large cost to Multnomah County. City Club has launched a study about PERS and potentially reforming it. I'd like to hear what you would suggest, both how it affects Multnomah County and how improvements might be made.
Well, PERS is obviously very expensive. It's also a contract that we've entered into with our employees over the long run. There have been changes that were made over the last decade or so that brought the cost down. One thing that we've done at Multnomah County very effectively is budget ourselves so that we anticipated higher costs. The recent slowdown in the economy, that's an optimistic way of putting it. The recent economic disaster we've been living through has led PERS to be really underfunded. And governments across the state are having to increase their local contribution to make up for that. Fortunately, at Multnomah County, we planned wisely, and we actually are fully covered, so we're not having to increase our costs for PERS. I do think that as a state, we need to view how we can afford this as an ongoing matter. I can't say that I've actually spent enough time looking at it to have a brilliant answer, but I think it's obviously a big concern for folks. My focus has been on making sure that Multnomah County is being responsible and that we've got ourselves covered, and the good news is we do.
Paddy Tillett, City Club member. As you know, our community is really in the forefront of eco-design and sustainable community design. One of the issues which is in the forefront of our thinking at the moment is that of everyone being close to healthy food and the idea of urban agriculture. It seems to me that you and your Chief of Staff have hit on a brilliant example of how this can be accomplished. And I wonder if there's potential for expanding that program somehow to use unused land throughout the county for a whole series of such projects.
I think there's huge potential for that, Patty. It's my hope, now that we've gotten this done and we have a track record and we've figured out how to set it up and how to run it, we're looking at other opportunities for expanding it within Multnomah County, specifically on Multnomah County government locations. I don't know how many there are going to be, but we're starting to broaden it. But the real opportunity is getting other institutions in this community who have land to start pitching in. Governments, colleges, large private landholders. There are thousands and thousands of acres of land in our metropolitan area that are laying fallow. There's also, I can tell you, a tremendous interest in this community in helping out in this regard. I've never been involved in any kind of program, any kind of process where we literally had to turn people away. People wanted to give us so many starts that we couldn't grow them all. We've had volunteers show up when there was just no need for them. We really tapped a real interest level in this community, and I hope that other governments, I hope the city of Portland, I hope Clackamas County and Washington County and Metro, I hope they're listening, because there's tremendous potential here, and I think that what we've done so far, it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Geez, seems so obvious to grow food for hungry people. Thank you for that. Debbie Lynn Molyneux, City Club member. And the question that I have is in regards to the budget. I know that often when county budgets come down, strings are attached to so much of the money from both state and federal matching funds. What percentage of the Multnomah County budget is actually is general fund that you can actually designate for, and how much of that is for security, safety, and then what is left over after that?
Our total all funds budget is roughly $1.3 billion. Of that, our general fund is around $350 million. So the majority of it, 60 to 70% of it, maybe that's 65 to 75%, don't check my math, is coming from the state and federal government and has an awful lot of strings attached. Where we can spend it, how we can spend it, what we can do with it. It's really important money, but you're exactly right, it's not very flexible money. Of our general fund, which is the money that we raise from local taxes, we have flexibility. We can do more or less what we want with those dollars. We spend about half of that on public safety. Our sheriff, our district attorney, and our community justice, the various efforts that we do, that takes about half of it. The rest of it is going to health and human services and our libraries and other community services, the bridges, the roads, those sorts of things. And so those are the dollars that we have flexibility with, although we would feel like we had more flexibility if it wasn't for the fact that they've been declining for 11 years in a row. So we do have capacity to make shifts in where we make those investments, but because it has been a declining pie, it's very much a zero-sum game.
Greg McPherson, City Club member. Excellent comments, Chair Cogen. I'm wondering if you are thinking outside the box about major structural changes in the mission of the county and what it does. In particular, I'm thinking about the fact that it's formally responsible for the Willamette River bridges, which is kind of an invitation to others who depend on those bridges, including some residents of Clackamas County, where I live, to imagine that it's not their responsibility to pay a portion of that. Are you thinking about that and other major structural questions?
Absolutely. I mean, just in broad general terms, times are so tight and our funding streams are so constrained that we're looking at everything we do and trying to figure out, does it make sense for us to still do this? Is there anyone else who's better positioned to do this? And when we've come to that, and or are there partnerships with which we can do this better? And when we come to that, we're looking into it. The issue specifically of the bridges, I've had conversations with folks at the City of Portland about whether it might make sense for them to have the bridges rather than us. I'm willing to continue those conversations. I believe that they will. For me, it's not a question of turf at all. It's a question of what's best for our residents. Now, I don't know that the simple truth of the matter is our bridges have hundreds of millions of dollars of unfunded liability associated with them. That's the reason that people haven't been lining up to take them. I think once we get the Selwood Bridge figured out and finalized, the sheer volume of that unfunded liability will be significantly decreased, but it's not like there's extra money. Frankly, there is still a liability associated with them. I think it makes an awful lot of sense, just if you take a 30,000-foot level, for these to be regional assets. These are absolutely regionally, these are regional assets, whether we assign the responsibility that way or not. Mentioning the Selwood Bridge, 70% of the trips across the Selwood Bridge either start or end in Clackamas County. Some very significant percentage, maybe it's 25%. The same could be said of Washington County. Of course, Multnomah County as well, but the point is, that's a region, and it makes sense for them to be treated regionally. So if the region said tomorrow, well, take them, they got them. But no one stepped up exactly that clearly yet.
March Kafori, member of the City Club. I'm going to raise a subject that might clear the room, which is urban renewal. The city seems to want to expand urban renewal. That affects the county's bottom line, of course. What is the wisdom in continuing to expand and use urban renewal when you can't pay your bills?
It's a good question. And urban renewal is very complicated, but basically what it is the community makes a decision to take a certain geographic area and cap all the taxes in that area, and from that moment forward, all increases, instead of going to the other taxing jurisdictions that usually get them, all the money goes into that urban renewal area and can only be used for capital, for bricks and mortar, can't be used for services. Now, urban renewal has been used in Portland for 50 years now, and I have to tell you, a lot of great things have happened in this community from urban renewal. I mean, there's a reason that we have such a phenomenally vibrant central city, and a lot of those investments have been made by urban renewal. But I also think it's the case that circumstances change over the decades. One thing that has changed over the decades is that, relatively speaking, the needs in our community are different. We have been disinvesting in services to people, in education and social services, for a very long time now. The federal government, starting with Ronald Reagan and really continuing ever since, has been disinvesting its dollars that have been flowing down to local communities. So the situation is different in that regard. A very big change also has been our change in our tax laws. Measure 5 and 50, which changed property tax laws, completely changed urban renewal in ways that people don't yet fully understand. Because urban renewal fundamentally is a bet on the future. Fundamentally, you're saying, we're going to cap this area and make investments of dollars into this area, but it's worth it, because in the long run, it builds the property tax base for the region, and everyone gets more at the end of the game. But because of the property tax limitation laws, the truth is, property can only increase 3%, no matter what. So if the property is not being subject to urban renewal, it can increase 3%. If you make a new billion-dollar investment of gigantic skyscrapers, the property right next to it still only increases 3%. So the upside for urban renewal is fundamentally different and much more constrained than it used to be before those changes in the tax law. Because the upside's different, and because the downside's different, it seems to me that we have to be very, very mindful about any urban renewal investments we make. And I'm not saying that there's never a time for urban renewal, but I think that urban renewal needs to be very carefully considered, because frankly, it's a trade-off. When dollars are getting funneled into an urban renewal area, those dollars are not available elsewhere. And the other taxing jurisdictions in our community that don't get those resources are our schools and Multnomah County. And there's always a difficulty in quantifying it, because when you say how many tax dollars you're not getting because of urban renewal, there's also the fact that some of those things might not have happened in the first place, and those tax dollars might not be there. But I can tell you that right now, as we're standing here today, each year Multnomah County is foregoing $26 million worth of tax revenues because they're going into the urban renewal areas in our community. That's money that's not available for the services I was talking about earlier. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a mistake, because there's good things that are being spent, those dollars are being spent on. But for a very long time, there was kind of an assumption that, okay, let's just do another urban renewal area, let's do another urban renewal area, almost as if it was free money. And it's not free money. I wish it was. I wish there was such a thing as free money. We could use it. But the simple fact is, it's a trade-off. And if we're going to make trade-offs, we need to be very, very aware of what is being traded off. And so I just want to make sure that when we're talking about urban renewal, we're thinking about it very carefully and understanding fully the implications of a decision to expand urban renewal. Is that it?
Virginia Cornyn, City Club member. This is kind of a combination of the tax question and the visioning and creativity question. I believe, and I may have the numbers slightly off, that in this morning's or yesterday's Oregonian, it said that Oregon is about the 33rd or 34th state in terms of total tax burden. And if you take the federal piece of that away, we move down to 44th or 45th. What would be your way of creating a conversation, maybe starting with Multnomah County, but in the state, as to what would it be if we decided that we were willing to be 30th? And what money would that bring, and where would it take us?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, the simple fact is the amount of taxes you raise is directly related to the amount of money you have to invest in yourself. Collectively, we are a low-tax state. If we are going to tax ourselves like Mississippi, eventually we are going to be the Mississippi of the West Coast. And I don't think that's okay. I mean, Mississippi's a pretty state. I don't want to pick on them particularly. But I mean, there's just no way around that. But I also think it matters how you get the taxes. And I think that one of the reasons that we are so stuck is that we have a tax system that both hurts people in the sense that it's very, very, people really feel how much they're paying, and is a disincentive in some ways to activities that we want to have happen. And to be really blunt about it, we have a very skewed tax system. We're relying entirely on income taxes and on capital gains taxes and on property taxes. The net result is we have very high income taxes, very high capital gains taxes, and very high property taxes. And people feel those and they respond to that. And so we have it's a very odd situation. We have this tremendous discontent with how much we're charging people in taxes when we really have a kind of a low tax state. And part of it is, as I said before, no one likes paying taxes. I don't think you ever get to a place where people are, hey, this is the perfect tax system, I can't wait to write my check. But I do think that there are, frankly, most states have figured out that if you spread it out more broadly, it's less painful and you can get more revenue out of it. The other thing is, and look, let's just be blunt about it, we don't have a sales tax, we should. Among other things, a sales tax lets you tax tourists. Right, I mean, you know, no one likes paying taxes, but I'll tell you, tourists don't actually vote here. That helps. But there's various studies at various times, but I have seen studies very recently that say we could change our tax system such that we could lower our property taxes and lower our income taxes, put in place a sales tax, have the exact same tax burden on Oregonians that they now have now, and have an extra $1 billion because the underground economy and tourists are contributing. To me, that seems like a no-brainer. I have just officially ended my political career.
And on that note, we've run out of time for further questions and we'll have to stop for today. Join us next week when we hear from Oregon Zoo Director Kimberly Smith about all things mammalian, reptilian, and amphibian at the Oregon Zoo. And as we close, please join me again in expressing our appreciation to today's guest, Jeff Cogen. We're adjourned.